Hello, hello. This is Yarrow, and welcome to Vested Capital Episode 3, where I'm excited to introduce you to Baird Hall, the founder of Wave, which is a company he just sold to Calm Capital. And Calm, you might remember, were the guests. The founders of Calm Capital, Marty and David, were on the last episode of this show, episode 2 of Vested Capital, where they explained how they began their holding company, Calm Capital. And in that, you would have heard a story about Wave, their most recent acquisition. Well, Baird is the co-founder of Wave. So you do get to hear the other side of that story in this podcast, where Baird explains to us why they decided to sell to Calm. There were other potential buyers at the time also making offers. He explains why he even wanted to sell. So you get a good sense of that side of the transaction. But mostly, this podcast is a fantastic deep dive into the history of a SaaS startup. Wave is a software tool for podcasters to make social media clips to help grow their show. And throughout this journey, you're going to hear from day zero all the way up to the acquisition and sale of Wave. And within that story, you're going to hear some really interesting side steps because often, and this is definitely a common thread with Baird, he would come up with a solution or create a feature or need to solve a problem in an existing business of theirs, and that would result in the creation of another one. In fact, Wave itself was spun out because they created a feature of their first company that didn't actually, take off, but then it turned into Wave. And then within Wave, another company called Subtitle was spun out when they needed to create a feature for Wave. Subtitle, which is a transcription tool, captions on videos and so on, is actually now also earning over 100,000 in monthly run rate. So Baird broke a few rules in my book anyway with starting multiple projects at once, but he's made it work. And it's very clear why. You're going to hear Baird give a great example of why he was able to do multiple projects, why he chose to do multiple projects at once. And it's worked. He's had 2 7-figure businesses. One he's just exited. He's now on to Turnkey, which is his current business, which certainly solves a big problem with churn. Subscription sites that have a lot of churn, they have a tool for helping reduce that. And of course, that tool came about because they needed to reduce churn in Wave. So every company was born from another company in this story. I think you'll love it. And I really want to thank Baird for being open and sharing so much. So you're going to learn a lot from this. Just before I start the interview, I want to recommend you check out inboxdone.com. That's what this episode is brought to you by. That's my company that can help you manage your email and your customer service. So if you're currently drowning in email messages, maybe social media inbox messages, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and so on, perhaps you're doing a lot of help desk ticket support, any of those areas where you need to do customer support or personally dealing with a lot of email in your own inbox, we provide a dedicated inbox manager, usually more than one person who will step in, manage your email, but also reply to your messages. And we get you out of your inboxes at least 80, 90%, even 100%, we can get you out so you never have to deal with email again. Check it out at inboxdone.com. Now let's begin the interview. All right, so here we are with Baird Hall, who is, well, I know him, first of all, as the founder of Wave, but he's actually the founder of 3 other companies, possibly more that I don't know about. But Baird, I'm happy to have you. Great to meet you.
Yeah, hey, Yarrow. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah, so just a bit of background for those who are like me, who might not know you. I found out about you because you were the founder or co-founder of a company called Wave, which is actually the first place I ever saw your work. That was via Indie Hackers. Seems to be a place where, all kinds of great entrepreneurs are hanging out lately. Just dived into what Wave did, because as a podcaster myself, Wave was a tool for creating like social content out of your audio, which was awesome. Then a little later on, discovered that you were actually acquired by a company called Calm Capital, which I just had the guys on the show. I know you know them well, Marty and David. They were just on the podcast literally just before you. So this is going to be a great connection to their story since they're the acquirer of Wave. So we can see both sides of the equation. But can you just give me a rundown? Besides Wave, what else are you in charge of now? And what do you consider your most significant businesses from the past?
Currently, 4 different companies. Wave was our first company. And when I say, I'll say we a lot because I have multiple co-founders across all these companies. And Subtitle is another company, which is an online video captioning and editing tool. Duplicate, which is a podcast transcription tool that turns podcasts into blogs. And then the most recent is Churnkey, which is a tool that we actually built internally for all of our companies to help prevent churn. Churnkey is a B2B SaaS tool that helps SaaS companies save churning customers at the point of cancellation. So currently up to 4, starting one while selling Wave was maybe a little aggressive, but we got through it. It was a busy couple months, but now the Calm team's up and running and doing great work with Wave, and we've shifted our focus to mainly Subtitle and Churnkey.
Okay, so there's a lot going on there. I remember following along with Wave and how you hit 100,000 monthly run rate, so truly over 1 million, and I think you hit 2 million run rate, and then you decide to sell. So a lot of questions about why even sell a company that's growing that fast. But before we dive into the Wave story, and maybe this will help connect the dots of which of these projects came first, because I know your background a little bit, and you were not always in tech, right? So born in Charleston, South Carolina, I want to get that right. Born and raised there. Did you go to school for anything business related?
No, I was actually born and raised in Kentucky. Actually, I grew up on a horse farm. We raised and trained Tennessee walking horses. So sometimes I think back to that, and it's just a very unlikely place to wind up working in tech.
Yeah, walking horses. Just what does exactly that mean? What's a walking horse? Don't all horses walk?
They're called Tennessee walking horses. It's a specific breed. They're really big horses with really high. They walk really high. Is kind of what's special about them. But we raised them and would show them, and grew up on a farm in Kentucky. But I moved to Charleston about 10 years ago. After I graduated college, my sister was living here and started working for a tech company called Blackbaud and did sales support, went to a startup that was early stage. And that was my first taste in like watching a company start almost I was the 10th employee. And I was there for 5 years. And as the company got bigger, I started realizing that I really enjoyed the early stage of companies, not so much the scaling and growing, which is what that company started to do. And so I left and started my first company with Nick, my original co-founder, and that was back in 2015. We tried to build. Well, it's easy to explain now. Finally, we tried to build Clubhouse for the most part. It was very similar to Clubhouse, but it was asynchronous. So instead of live audio chats, they were community-based asynchronous audio chats, and we worked on that for like a year and a half, and we just made all the classic startup mistakes. And that's kind of how it all got started.
So how did you meet Nick?
Our wives are best friends, and they got tired of hearing us talk about all of our cool startup ideas. And they were like, you all just need to go to Starbucks and talk to each other about this stuff because we don't want to hear it anymore. So it was actually kind of interesting. We kind of lucked into a good process, I think, of becoming partners. We would meet up every Sunday at Starbucks and no agenda. We would just talk about ideas, what we're working on, what we're interested in. And we did that for probably 2 or 3 months and just started finding out that we kind of thought about things similarly, had complementary skill sets. And then we decided to start that first company. It was a good low pressure way to really get to know somebody, how they think, because I could only imagine. I've really lucked out. I've got awesome co-founders. Everybody works really well together, honest, fair people. And I could just only imagine how bad it could be if you picked the wrong partner. So it was a good way to meet each other, really learn each other before making any big commitments, because you wind up splitting your life down the middle after, once the company's up and running. So that's how we met.
And as you say, you tend to spend more time with your business partner than your wife, your husband, right? And so it's a very, very constant relationship. I do have one curiosity. I'm always curious about this. When you were back in university or college, what did you actually study?
I was a communications major. I was a poor student, career 2.6 GPA, I think. I was never really interested in anything in school, which led me to not enjoy studying or going all that much. But finally, at my junior year of college, I started studying communications, which was it was a mix of like advertising, writing, understanding interpersonal communication, corporate communication. And that's when I really just got interested in how people communicate with one another. And it's kind of been a constant theme through, well, at least the first few companies was all about helping people communicate more clearly on the internet, whether it's by promoting their podcast or getting their videos properly set up for social media and making things stand out. And how do you get people's attention on the internet? So that was kind of the early, I would say this is the first field of study I ever got interested in. And it's interesting, the farther I get away from school, the more I enjoy learning because I actually get to choose what I want to work on and can apply it to businesses that I start. So
I so agree. I'm exactly the same. Well, reading textbooks back in university was like torture. And now I can
yeah,
read a book and, you get through it in a couple of days and you love it. So the power of getting to choose what you study, though, makes a big difference, right?
it does.
Love to know, though. So you two, you meet each other,
Mhm.
you're getting to know each other, and then you decide to start a clubhouse, so an asynchronous audio platform,
Mhm.
which to my mind sounds like a little bit of a technical challenge in
It
terms of,
was, especially in 2015.
yeah, streaming content, multiple users at the same time. Not an easy thing to do. Why did you guys think you guys could do it?
We being naive, most likely.
Okay.
Yeah, and we tried to do it. This was just when like hybrid mobile apps were starting to come out. So we used, oh gosh, I can't even remember the name of the platform that we used. It's been so long, but it was like one of the first kind of hybrid frameworks for building iOS and Android apps. So on top of all that, we were using this new technology that people were still trying to figure out. Yeah, I feel bad for Nick and all those development hours that went into building this thing because we actually got a mobile app up and running and had thousands of users
Oh, wow.
active, happy. Like people loved this thing. It was this, we found some really niche groups that loved it. And in hindsight, yeah, it was a lot of Nick's time. We would have done things a lot differently. We made all the mistakes. It was called UTalk, and that was trademarked. It was right from the beginning. We picked a trademark name, and that became a problem down the road.
Oh, you
And
guys didn't have the trademark. Someone else had the
yeah, we
trademark.
didn't have the trademark.
Oh,
And we didn't think about revenue models or how we were going to monetize it. It was just basically like, hey, this idea is really cool. We really like it. Let's go build it. We didn't do much customer discovery. We just did a lot of things wrong. It was a pretty painful first year, but I'm glad we did it because it led to one of the tools that we built to try to make this company work was we had all these users sharing audio content on our app, and we needed a way to put it on social media. And so Nick built a tool that turned these audio clips that people were recording into Facebook videos. And once we started sharing those, podcasters and other people started saying, hey, your app's not that cool, but how'd you do that? How'd you create that video? And that's when the light bulb went off. We're like, oh, this is what it's like to like solve somebody's problem and actually, sell them a product that helps them do what they want.
okay. So I got a few questions here. Nick sounds like he's quite a good engineer, developer. If he can build a lot of these tools, and correct me if I'm wrong, he was doing the lion's share of the coding based on the way you
Yep.
described it. Are you also a programmer on some level?
Nope. I tried that first year and realized that it's not for me. So I do everything. Most of the co-founders are technical and I do most of the marketing, support, sales, project management, all of those things.
Everything else. Okay. That's great. Well, I mean, it's a challenge to find good developers. I'm the same as you. I'm not a programmer and do all the
Yeah,
marketing side of things. And I've had trouble finding the development side. So you've lucked out with the co-founders.
I really did. Nick he's a unicorn in a lot of ways. He's a former lawyer and passed the bar and then decided to become a software developer. And he's got a degree in economics. So he has just really wide range of expertise that really comes in handy. So I got lucky getting paired up with him early on.
Right. Yeah, I think I remember reading that because you two were both not from like entrepreneurial backgrounds, and then you sort of,
Yep.
hey, let's do software, which is kind of
Yep.
hard, but maybe your naivety made it a good thing because you just went and did
Yep.
it when most people who know how hard it is might not have tried. In terms of finances, because I know a lot of people listen to this, they're also at the early stages, and they're like, how do I spend my entire time focused on whatever it is, developing software, trying to get my first users, when you've got a family potentially to feed, a mortgage to
Mhm.
pay for, rent to pay for? What situation and how did you guys both manage that during the early stages?
Well, I blew through about 30 grand, which was all my savings at that point. I was like 25. I'd been working for 6 years, I guess, and blew through that with the first company. And then when we sold that company, we had to take consulting jobs to pay the bills. And so we were basically doing that for about 60% of the time, I would say. We were doing consulting projects. And then we were working with a local group here in town. And then 40% of the time we were spending working on Wave and moving it forward. We both put $1,000 into it up front, and that's it. That's the only financial investment we put in. And I would say that in hindsight, looking all the way back, I wish I had leveraged my day job in a way. And I jumped off the cliff basically without a parachute, which is one way to do it. And It did work out, so I wouldn't change anything. But I do wish I was a little smarter in like using my day job to basically fund my side projects until they became big enough to where it's like, okay, now it's time to roll from this thing to the next. And I guess we're still learning how to do that with, selling a company and then kind of transitioning into the new one. Again, I probably did those a little bit too close together. I could have spaced it out, would have been a little easier. But it's hard to time things, and you just got to do what you can in the moment and slowly work your way forward. I think the biggest learning has just been playing the long game and not thinking so much about like, oh my gosh, I have to have 40 grand to hire some developer tomorrow, rather than, what can I accomplish over the next year? What can I accomplish over the next 3 to 5 years? Because that's how long this stuff takes. So I don't know if that exactly answers it, but that's kind of where, that's where we were.
It is funny, in these interviews, I often find there's two different types of people. There's the burn the bridges, jump off the cliff, as you said, type of person who just, they need almost the pressure of making this work for their financial freedom as well, or they're just surviving. Yep. And then there's the completely cautious, I worked in a job until I was more than 100% confident that my company would replace or more than the income I was making. So it's rare for it to be carefully managed in a kind of 50-50 kind of way. It's one or the other.
I've been thinking a lot about fear lately as far as it comes to entrepreneurship. And I think it's really what drives a lot of us to, we're fearful that the company's going to fail. We're fearful that it's going to take too long or whatever it might be. And I found that I've been the most effective in my entrepreneurship endeavors when I'm not having fear and I'm not worried about what the outcome is, but I'm just following what I want to do and like working in the moment and really enjoying it and saying, no, I want to work on this and I'm going to see where it goes. And I'm going to, keep some opportunities open and have some flexibility, but it's hard to manage that. And you need to have a little fear because you need to have some pressure to, get the company up and going. You got to have some, incentive to go make sales and get the business side going, but it's a tough balance. That's for sure.
Yeah. And you've gone through both sides, at the sort of early days where I think it's safe to say fear is just survival. Will I pay for my food and rent and family? Versus now you've had an acquisition, you've had an exit, you've got multiple companies that have succeeded. Your fear is, maybe a little bit of losing what you have, but also I think I read, remember in the acquisition story, the sharing you did with Wave, not the only reason, but part of the reason you sold was a big chunk of your net worth was in this one business. Yeah. So let's diversify a little bit, exit this one. But before we talk about that, I do want to connect the dots. So UTalk is the name of the Clubhouse style company, right?
Yep.
So you discover from user feedback, they want to know how to make these social media audios that Nick had created for promoting or allowing UTalk users to promote with. Do you just switch UTalk off and then dive into Wave and launch a whole new business? Like, how did that transition happen?
It was a few-month process. We actually sold the code base to a group that had a live streaming company, and they wanted to add some audio components. So we actually found somebody to buy it. At the end of the day, it was pennies on the dollar compared to what we put into it, and especially if you accounted for our time. But it was nice to actually, sell it and give it to somebody that can use it. But the company
turned into the Clubhouse, right?
Yeah, that would have been, I would have felt, that would have been a tough pill to swallow. So there was a few-month process where we were transitioning that code base and all the tech to the buyers. And then at the same time, we were starting the marketing page and starting to lay the foundation for what would become Wave. And I remember we started it and we got a few customers within the first month or so. And the goal was always for it to pay our mortgages. That was what Nick was like, if we can build a side project that pays our mortgages, like that can start opening up, give us some freedom to start thinking about other things. And it just kept ticking up every month. You have 5-10% month over month growth, and you do that for a couple of years. You look back, and it was did a lot more than we expected.
Well, tell me about that. So, you started a SaaS. I can see you've got Nick sitting there making like the beta version of this tool. When you first got your first customers, like how did you even do that? Where did they come from? And was it a case of them just going to a very basic version of a website with a credit card and then log into the tool? How does it work?
We learned our lesson from the first company. So we're like, what is the quickest, easiest way that we can try to get customers for this and see if people will pay for it? And man, I'm honestly kind of embarrassed to share this sometimes, but Nick is a really good, I guess hacker is the term. He's really good at like putting pieces together quickly and kind of building MVPs. And we had a WordPress site that used a theme, and we used WordPress Simple Pay, I think was the plugin. I'm not sure if that's around anymore. And people would subscribe and nothing would happen. They would pay us and they would basically get an email that sent them a URL to an IP address that had the web app on it. And we had no authentication. There was no login. There was no registration. It was like, you pay us money, we give you a link, and it goes to this IP address that would let people use the tool, and it wouldn't save their settings or anything. They would have to start over every time they used it, and people paid us for it, and they used it and they loved it.
Oh, wow.
And it's so funny that looking back, people actually loved it. They were like, this is great. I don't have to log in. I don't have to give you any of my data. It's just like, it was the simplicity of it. People actually really enjoyed it. That was the first version. And we had 10 customers on there before we actually like put it behind a domain and added a sign up page and things like that.
Wow, that's so ghetto. I love it.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
I haven't heard someone go out with a SaaS without like the login function, because anyone could just share the link and use the tool, right? It wouldn't have.
Yeah, and it was, there's kind of the beauty of looking back. We realized that nobody knew us, nobody cared about us, and it was actually an advantage because we could do those kind of things and take those risks. And we weren't worried about what somebody was going to say on Twitter, or somebody was going to post it on Indie Hackers and we were going to get roasted, or Reddit, whatever. So we actually used that to our advantage and just kind of, I guess you would call it kind of stealth mode. Yeah. And it allowed us to move really fast.
Where did those 10 customers come from?
Mostly, there were a couple referrals from people we already knew. We had a lot of podcasters on our platform before, so we had some of those, but it was mainly direct email. I would just email people. And what I did was Nick built me a nice little tool where I would do two things. I would pull up Twitter and I would look through people that were promoting images for their episodes. That was kind of the new way to promote, like show it off on social media. And Nick built me this little RSS search tool so I could put in their podcast and it would go find their email in the RSS feed. And I would just send them an email saying, hey, I saw you're promoting your new episode. That image looks great. Have you ever thought about posting a clip on social media? And 1 out of 10 people would be like, no, but that sounds awesome. How do I do it? And then I would just send them a link and get them started. So it was definitely, I had a sales background, so I was comfortable doing that. And realized that my big lesson and I'm trying to get back to this too, because I'm doing direct sales for Turnkey to get our first 50 customers. That's what our next goal is. Just short, to the point emails asking people for permission to start a conversation. That's basically my goal when I'm doing direct outreach. But it was I'd say the first 50 to 100, first 50 customers were very manual. And then I started moving to Instagram direct messaging because that's what people were trying to promote their podcast on Instagram. Probably got to 100 that way. And then that whole time we were dropping a lot of content, a lot of blog content. And then the content marketing started picking up.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great evolution. I think I should clarify, just a few people might not quite understand what Wave does. So it is about taking a chunk, like a section of a podcast, much like you're listening to now, making a visual representation of that. You guys had templates that look great. It just spat that out. The audio, the template, the transcript, I believe, possibly too.
Captions.
Correct. Yep, captions. And then you just upload it to your social and away you go. So, and I love the direct target of users who are ready posting to a social platform to promote their podcast. Like that is a customer target base. If you could, you can't get any more targeted than that. So I'm actually doing a similar process for my company in Bucks Done. We go to Twitter. Anyone who complains about having too much email, I try and get in front of them and say, I have a company that manages your email, right? Not quite as linear as yours, but close to it. And it's amazing you got to 100 customers doing that. So it shows what just hustling every day, trying to find one at a time can do for you. I'd love to talk more, though, about this transition to content marketing, because I'm hearing that more and more now from startups, less reliance on paid advertising or press coverage. It's just produce consistent blog content, which coming from my background as in the blogging space, I love hearing that. And it seems to be paying dividends. So was that a conscious choice because you just were limited by budget, or why did you choose to focus on content like that, organic SEO?
Yeah, it was mostly because we didn't have any budget. It was the one thing that I could just spend my time. At that time, our advantage was having time. We had no timeline. We had consulting gigs that were paying the bills, and we had an open, runway of time to work with. And that was seemed like the most effective use of it. And it took about 6 months of writing. We would write a blog post a week, a blog post every 2 weeks, and just consistently putting out content. I was no SEO expert. I just tried to write content that I thought podcasters would ask about. And
What's an
most of it,
example of a piece of content that did well?
our most highest performing blog post of all time is 9 interview questions to ask as a podcaster. So podcasters that are wanting to know, like, what are some new podcast questions that I can ask my guests? That's a big one.
Just going to Google that now for this podcast so I can find
Yeah.
these 9 questions to ask you.
Yeah. And the other ones a lot were like, just how do I promote my podcast on Instagram? How does that work? What are the rules? What size does the image need to be? So there's a lot of how-to videos early on, because we learn that they're just very resourceful and love to do things themselves, and they love, trying to learn new things they can do better. So it just worked out really well. And we were early too. That was helpful. There wasn't many people talking about it back then. There's only 200,000 podcasts, I think, when we started.
I'm guessing that was your job. You were the content guy.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So take us forward. You get to 100 users, enough to cover your mortgages at that point in terms of revenue?
Oh, no. It took us, I always forget, it was such a long process. I mean, I think it took us a year and a half to get to 10K MRR. I mean, we were doing like $7 average revenue per user. So, that was about 1,000 MRR, I guess, at that point, close to it. So it took us a while. I think I almost quit at 6K, 9K.
I think I remember reading your story. You were going to quit at one point because you were like, this is it. We're not getting to 10K. We got to either quit or do something different.
Yeah, it just felt like it was going to take so long. And I didn't realize a couple of things. I didn't realize it was linear growth, but it was a 5% month over month growth. And I just didn't understand how our word of mouth marketing was working. It was working a lot better than I thought. And as our customer base grew and more people were sharing these videos, the more people were finding out about us. So our growth always stayed around that between 5 and 10% month over month. And that feels like nothing for a year and a half, but it's kind of a snowball effect almost, that at a certain point, you don't realize it, but at a certain point, you're like, oh man, this is 5% month over month growth at 30K starts to become really interesting. So we just had to get kind of past that inflection point to where the market really knew who we were and the inbound marketing engine was really starting to work. And then it just kept going.
Yeah, I can imagine like 5% when you've got 20 users is one new user, but 5% when you've got 1,000, is 50. So it's a big difference. Okay, so you made it through that period where you weren't sure whether you'd be able to live off this business. You finally reach 10,000 a month. How does your mindset change about your future with this business at that point?
The pressure comes off a little bit, definitely. But I don't think it really changed much. We were just I think back to, I really try to recreate that moment that we were in, because we didn't really change anything. We were just so in the moment and thinking about the business and growing it and having fun. And, we were celebrating all these milestones that were happening and just kept pushing it forward. And I don't think the mindset really shifted. There was no moment where we were like, oh, now that we have X number of dollars, now we can go do this, or we can hire this person. We had always been prioritizing to have a lean, recurring revenue model. The goal was to build a company that didn't need those things so that it could run on its own. We assumed it was going to be kind of a side project that we wanted to generate passive income. So we were always building it in a way where we didn't need to do those things. So it was really just keep doubling down on what works is kind of where we were. It's a good question. I haven't really thought about it too much.
I mean, I ask it because for a lot of people, 10,000 a month is like this holy grail. I'm free. I don't need a job. We can survive. So often it's a place where a little bit of a hallelujah moment. At the same time, I think everyone also realizes it's just another step towards continuing down the same path. So how do you go from 10,000 to 100,000 a month? You said it's just more of the same, but obviously you've got more customers. You've got to build a team. It's a little different from those 2 points. So what changed for you guys?
Yeah, one big thing was learning how to outsource things that were taking up a lot of our time, or things that we didn't really enjoy doing. So the content marketing was something that I don't love writing. It was something I just did because it's what was needed early on. And now that started working, we hired a content team to actually write these. Let's start producing more content. Where else can we put content? What forums or websites like Quora, whatever it may be, and that's kind of what it looked like for okay, well, writing on our blog works. Let's do more of that, and then where else can we post this stuff? Same thing with social media. We weren't very good at we're not really good at a lot of things. We just get good enough at it to see if it works, and then try to bring in somebody that really knows it and take it on. That's how I look at our job. Our job is to figure out what works and what doesn't, and then get the right people in place to scale it up and to do more of it. Paid advertising was one that worked pretty well too. We were really early to that. So we had low cost per click on AdWords and Facebook. And we found that, meeting people where like our whole point was to help people share things, videos on social media. So when we would promote a video advertisement and show people that way, that really worked. Again, something that I just tested out. AdWords and Facebook are the two places that we really worked on that. And then bringing someone in there to actually write the copy, start pumping more money into ads. I will say that's one thing that we probably really went heavy on for 2 years was paid ads, and that we reinvested a lot of our revenue into that.
Okay, nice. Now, I just want to clarify, did Subtitle or Duplicate show up at any point in time for this, or this comes after Wave?
Yeah, no, it did. So Subtitle actually showed up in 2008. So Wave had been running for 2 years, and we were at that point, I think we were probably doing like 30K, something like that. So it was like, we felt good about it. It was growing. And I started having some time freed up because we were, outsourcing things. And Subtitle came about because our customers kept asking us to add captions on these videos, on these social media videos that Wave was creating. And every time we scoped out the project, it was going to be so expensive. And we are very diligent about prioritizing features that are going to grow the business, not just because people are asking for them, but what's the time going to go into it and what's our return going to be? Really early on, we're really serious about that. And it was hard to quantify, like, is this actually going to bring us more customers, or is this just something that, kind of a cool thing that people want? And so we kept putting it off because it was going to be so expensive. And then I got the idea that, like, well, look, if we're going to drop 20K or whatever it might be to get this whole system built out, can it exist on its own and then integrate into Wave and power it? Because if we're going to build this thing for our, very specific style of audiogram video, can it just do this for any video? And Nick at the time, he just had a kid and was working a full-time job. He was the founding engineer at another company that was focused on crypto while he had built Wave. And then
you're asking him to create a transcription engine as well, are you?
Yeah, exactly. And he was just like, man, he had just taken on too much risk at that time. But we had an engineer that we worked with at our consulting firm named Jay that he was really interested in entrepreneurship, and Nick and him know each other really well. And he was like, why don't you just go build this with Jay and then integrate it? And these two can, kind of be sister companies basically. So they are separate businesses, separate cap tables, but they integrate really well with one another and play very nicely.
So how did Subtitle kind of grow? If I'm assuming you were in there building Wave, writing all this content, trying to get that to the next level. Is there a different team in place for Subtitle doing everything there from day one, or?
It was kind of the same setup as Nick and I had, but it was myself and Jay. And that was my first lesson in that the same playbook doesn't work for every company. I was like, this makes so much sense. This is going to be just like Wave. I can just do the content marketing and people are going to want to use it, and we'll just do the exact same thing. And it was very different. I did direct outreach early on. That did work to get people to use it. Interesting enough, though, we kind of got early in on LinkedIn video. LinkedIn video came out that same summer. Mm-hmm. And so we reached out to LinkedIn influencers, and these people are more B2B, and they really care about the way that they're presenting themselves on social media. And so we got in early with some of those influencers, and they used it and would tell people about it, and it really grew. That's probably how we got our first 100 customers or so. And then paid advertising worked really well for Subtitle as well.
You still own Subtitle. Can you share what your monthly run rate is with that company?
Yeah, it's doing, I think, 112K MRR. So it's really come along. It's been 3 years now, and it's got a really healthy profit margin. It's more expensive to run from the tech side because these videos sometimes can be 4K videos and things can be really engineering intensive. But yeah, it's a great business, and we've got a big new version 3 coming out, some new features dropping as the people are making the transition to short vertical videos. So we've got a lot of support coming out for that. But yeah, it's still going.
Can you clarify exactly how does it work though? So like I have a video I recorded. Well, you explain it. You're going to do a better job than I will.
Yeah, so it takes your video and it automatically transcribes it, which that in itself is not that big. There's a lot of things that will do that out there. But what it allows you to do is to really edit your transcript very quickly. Gives you a nice notepad and tools to clean up the transcript because it's never going to be 100% accurate. And then it gives you tools to design your captions. That's the other big thing that we learned is people, sometimes they have a logo on the video or it's a vertical video and they want their captions to show up in certain ways. And then it also makes it really easy. Well, to go into it, it started out as just video captioning. That's what it did. It helped you design video captioning. And it was a pay per use model. So you would buy a pack of minutes and it would get charged as you used it. And we would kept getting to like 7, 8K MR. Oh, it wasn't recurring revenue at that time, but 7 to 10K a month, but it was never predictable. So we could never properly invest in the business. And it just wasn't really sticky. People would come in and use it for a video and then they wouldn't come back for the next one. And that's when we made the transition to like, hey, all these people are transcribing videos for social media. Let's help them do other things to get their video ready for social media. So the big one was resizing, just making sure that your video is sized properly for Snapchat versus Facebook versus Twitter. And trimming, clipping, making sure that you're picking, if you wanted to trim it down to a smaller portion, things like that. So yeah, it's mainly around just getting the video ready for social media so it really pops.
And that's all engineering based. Like it's not like an outsourced service. It's the code
correct.
doing everything.
Yeah, it's a tool that helps video creators do these things.
Okay, so everything's automated, like AI transcription powered kind of backend as well. Okay, cool. So, wow, it's interesting to think about Wave and Subtitle. They're very similar now as we sort of talk about them. They're both about creating social media content. They both have transcriptions. They both allow you to control elements of the social content that matter, logo, size. So one positioning is purely, this is for podcasters to do that. The other one's positioning is, this is for video. And it sounds like LinkedIn video was kind of like the starting point. It's easy to have seen those two things be the same company, really. Like you could have turned Wave into and I asked this question too, because in my mind as an entrepreneur, and I've heard many entrepreneurs share a similar story, as soon as you are in the trenches with one company, and you said you kind of started Subtitle when you're doing about 30,000 monthly run rate with Wave, to then start an entirely new company, to me, it's like, well, now you're taking some of that energy that might have been creating the momentum behind Wave, and you're putting it behind Subtitle, which has no traction yet. So it sounds a little bit like the classic mistake of multiple focus. At the same time, I'm talking to you now when you've sold Wave, when it was already doing $2 million a year. Subtitle's on the way to that number. It's well over $1 million a year. So you clearly made it work. But do you feel like if you were talking to someone else, would you recommend to them you do what you did? Or why choose to have two separate companies when that could be one? There's a lot of things there that I want to understand your thinking.
Yeah, I think we have realized, in looking back, I think a lot of people build business. I think this is a mistake that entrepreneurs make quite often, is that they build businesses that don't fit their personality and strengths. And we found over time that we're really good at focusing on a specific group of people and solving, a specific problem that they have. And we've just really focused on doing that. It would have been easier, and we've thought a lot of different ways that Wave could go. We've thought about taking into hosting and like being the podcast host that then has the best marketing tools. We've thought about turning it into a place where content can be stored and saved. But we always remind ourselves that what we're good at is building niche software businesses. And anytime that we get the scope to expand it at some point, we know that like this is just not our strength, because then you start, if we were really trying to build, probably what Descript is probably the best analogy in our space, that they do everything. It's like podcast editing and video creation. They do a lot of different things. I think, building a big company like that has a lot of different focuses, then you have to be good at hiring. You have to be good at organizational processes and, running an efficient team, things like that. And those are just not the things that we do. So we try to build businesses that are lean and can be self-sufficient. And also we love the creative process, building probably too much sometimes. We love it so much that we're always ready to start the next new thing, not so much see how far we can take the current thing. So I don't know if it was it turned out to be a good call, but I don't know if it was the best. But yeah, that was kind of the thought behind it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, because you do highlight, at the end of the day, this is a decision by the people in charge of what they're doing, and everyone's got a different goal, a different motivation. So sure, I could assess this and say, wow, Wave would be a much bigger company if you had both spent all your time on it, you build everything for it, all your marketing. Sure, and if that was your only goal, then mission accomplished. But like you said, you like this creative startup new
Hmm.
idea phase more than the growing a team. Because it's true, as a founder, you step away from the day-to-day creative side and start becoming more of a hiring person, team manager role, which is not as much fun when you're, selling something new and it's fresh and you're the one out there trying to
Yeah.
push it. So I can see why you made that choice. But everyone's different, of course. So take
Hmm.
us forward then. So you've got, and actually I need to timestamp this too, because I'm getting a little confused. So UTalk was like 2000, early 2000s? Is that when that was? Or
2015.
2015
Yeah,
was UTalk? Because you mentioned earlier, when did Wave start? What year?
2016. So it was like basically like a year. We probably started on 2014 working on UTalk, but we really spent that whole year full time on it in 2015. And then 2016 started Wave. And then 2018 started Subtitle.
Okay. And the last one of this four companies, I know we'll talk about Turnkey too. That's your current one, but Duplicate, did that come in this journey as well? Or is that?
That came in last summer. It was during it was during COVID. We were all in lockdown and quarantine, and we were like, let's start another company. And
Of course you do.
that was probably, looking back, we just didn't have the time. It was not a good time to start it because but it was a tool. We were basically trying to work on Wave and Subtitle, and playing off of that is building more of a content repurposing tool that could kind of do what Wave and Subtitle does and some other things, and kind of bundle a lot of tools together into one. And I think the scope just kind of ran away from us. We haven't been working on that lately. It does a couple hundred MRR, and it's got some customers that like it. They use the transcription tool and format the transcription into a blog post. So yeah, we started that one last summer. And then Turnkey was something we had been building internally for Wave and Subtitle. And then we really decided to say, okay, let's start putting our focus into Turnkey just in September of last year.
Okay. We will leave the acquisition of Wave until we talk about Turnkey, because I know Turnkey was an internally developed tool before it became a standalone company, which is now your main focus. So how does Turnkey evolve? And this is funny because Turnkey is the first company, it sounds like, that you had an idea for within one company. Wave sounds like it was like
Yep.
the starting point for a lot of companies, or maybe even UTalk really, but Wave is kind of where you start getting some traction. You hit some problems, then you think we have to solve this. Hey, let's start a new business, right? And now
Yeah.
Turnkey, I know you're going to tell me the same story. It's like we had this problem in Wave and Subtitle. This could be a business. We should start one. But this time you didn't start it while doing the other one. You said maybe we'll sell Wave. So can you maybe, first of all, tell us what Turnkey is within Wave when it first became an idea, and then we'll connect that to the selling of Wave story.
Yeah, our biggest problem with Wave has always been churn. It's been high churn. Podcasters, they do seasons, they take time off, circumstances happen, they can't, they want to cancel the $10 charge. We're kind of the first thing that a podcaster cancels when they're trying to kind of downsize their expenses. So we were always at like 12 to 14% churn, and we knew that that's what was preventing us from, really kind of getting to the next level of growth. And we tried everything. We hired consultants. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on consultants and onboarding tools and analytics and prediction tools. And all those things, really, a lot of those things do help. But the one place where we saw consistent, measurable return on investment with churn was optimizing our cancellation flow. So that all started when we offered pausing. We noticed that podcasters will just take 2 months off. A lot of them do seasons. And instead of them canceling and hoping that they come back, we would say, hey, instead of canceling, we'll keep all your data, we'll keep all your videos safe, and just pause for 2 months, and it'll reactivate. And we'll send you an email when it reactivates. And we started cutting churn by 12% right away by offering pauses. And then we thought, well, if people want to pause, maybe we can just offer a discount. And this is nothing new. This is, if you call your cable company up and try to cancel, this is kind of the same playbook that a lot of bigger businesses use to try to keep you around, give you incentives to keep your subscription going. So we're really just taking that and, putting it into an automated flow that the user can go through, and it'll allow them to choose why they're canceling. And based on why they cancel, we pitch them the specific offer. And once we got the discounts, we also added technical support so that if somebody's canceling because of a feature or something that's not working, instead of them canceling, we get them connected with a customer support person right away. That saves probably a dozen customers a month. So when we put all those things in place, we cut our churn down by 25%. And then all of a sudden our growth ceiling opens up because we're not losing as many customers. So it had such an impact on our business that we were like, we have to try to sell this to other SaaS companies because we can really make a big difference. But we definitely took our time building it into Wave first and making sure that we were learning as much as we could, building it for ourselves before pulling it out and turning it into its own product.
Yeah, I got a question about that because I had a good look at the Turnkey website and I'm like, this is smart. I had some subscription businesses before and I know like a lot of the churn process, like you said, when they're asking to leave or cancel, we'd rely on a human being, my customer support person, to essentially dynamically answer and offer on the fly some kind of special discount or a pause of membership, all things you're saying to try and keep them an active member. And it works. It definitely does work. But then I'm thinking, you've obviously SaaSified that. You've turned that into software. But I couldn't quite get my head around, like, your dashboard looks great, and I recommend everyone go check out turnkey.com. But I was like, okay, so there's a dashboard for seeing the stats on my churn. And I thought you've got like a survey type mechanism, I believe, like a questionnaire of some sorts. But it seems like a little bit of like an octopus software. There's all these different kind of almost tools you can use to try and reduce the churn. Can you maybe just explain how, because I can see how you built this for yourselves. You obviously said, hey, let's try this. Oh, let's build that into our own software. So how does that come together? And maybe what is the most important piece in terms of a software part of this solution?
So Turnkey actually embeds it's a JavaScript embed that you put within your SaaS app. And there's a little bit of server-side code that connects Turnkey to Stripe so it can facilitate these questions. And I mean, the biggest part of Turnkey is the flow itself. So when the embed pops up, it allows you to decide what you want to ask and what you want to offer at what time.
So this is when I click cancel, just to clarify. So
exactly.
Okay. So I'm in Wave. I want to cancel. I click cancel button. Turnkey pops up basically, or starts asking me things.
And takes over, and it turns into it's a modal that pops up, and it asks questions. It says, well, why do you want to cancel? Actually, the first thing that we do at Wave is because the pausing is so successful. That's the first thing that we choose to offer up, and then we ask them why they're canceling, and then it can, based on why they're canceling, you can set up each one to an offer, and then discounts or hidden plans is another one that's really interesting, of like plans that you don't put on your website, but that you're willing to offer customers to stick around. So example would be if, a podcast host, if somebody wants to cancel, it's like, well, why not pay $5 a month and we'll keep your, podcast going as opposed to taking it down. And then if the customer accepts a deal or cancels, whatever the end result is, it shows up in a sessions result within the Turnkey dashboard. So it's kind of two-part. One is the embed that's actually user-facing, and then the dashboard is kind of we call it like our no-code dashboard where you can make the changes and see what's working and what's not working.
I can see why. I mean, this is a little more complicated, I feel, than, say, what you've done with Wave and Subtitle. Definitely. Like it's a little bit of human interaction intelligence you're going to start to have to manage and turn into software. But I do love it. I think you guys, I can see why you're excited about it too, the challenge of doing that, which is probably not as well serviced today. You're in a bit of a unique niche. So, but before I know that spun off as a company, maybe we can do the chronology here. So you're running Wave, you've hit 100,000 a month, 150,000 a month. I'm assuming part of that growth is because you got on top of churn, thanks to your internal version of Turnkey.
Definitely.
How far did you go before you decided to sell? Was it 200,000 a month, monthly run rate, or?
We were at a little over 140. So we decided to sell. We were probably at 130. I would guess 125. We've looked at acquisition offers over the years, and every time just didn't feel like it was the right time. We felt there was a lot of potential in front of us. But with Wave, we really got to a point, and this kind of goes back to the conversation we were having about why not expand the scope of Wave and start doing other things. And anytime we looked at that, it just didn't feel like we were the right people to do it. And even so much like going back to the churn discussion, Wave just became big enough to where, having somebody thinking about churn for 4 months really made a big impact. Like 0.5% of churn makes a big impact on the business. And it really needed people that were more scientific, that enjoyed diving deep down into these really specific problems and solving them. Where it's not our natural tendency. We really like to think about new things and like, what can we build next? And so it started to feel, the first real reason was, it really felt like Wave needed a new set of operational team members. So that's kind of where we got started. And then the more we thought about it, we realized how much risk we had tied up in the business compared to, our net worth. And then at that point, you start thinking of black swan events like, oh gosh, what if, who knows what could happen? And so it just felt like the right time to take the risk off the table. And the other thing is we knew what we wanted. We were like, we know we want to work on turnkey. So let's do this and it can free up our time and we can really focus on it.
And to be fair for you, you've got Subtitle running, doing $100,000 a month too. So, which actually leads me to a question. I'm curious. Okay, you're feeling like a lot of your net worth is tied in. Your capital is inside Wave. You want to exit and get some of that out. But like, were you guys both earning a salary from Wave? Were you taking one from Subtitle? Like, how much were you, building capital from just cash flow?
Yeah, we were. We were distributing all of our profits with Wave to the partners. So, and we had been doing that for about 2 years probably. And yeah, Subtitle was paying me as well. So it was less about, we didn't need it, but it just felt like getting the cash advance. Basically, it's essentially what you're doing is you're saying, I want the next 3 years up front and then I'm done for the most part, as opposed to taking it over the next 3 years. And now the other thing that changed, we both have families and we both have houses. We need bigger houses for these kids. And so that was another part of it too. We're just in a time in life where it felt like the right thing to do.
I guess on the video of this, I'm looking at the house that Wave bought, right? Is that fair to say?
No, not yet. We're still in the same. That's actually hopefully coming in the future. But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice. So
yeah, thanks.
Okay, so, and I can understand that there's always conflicting motivations, or maybe not conflicting, but you want money, you want to focus on something new. Those things may not be equal. You get both of them when you exit. So, okay, take us forward. Then you decide to actually make a sale. There had of Wave. You want to leave that company. There had been prior offers, as I know, and at the start we mentioned this. The guys from Calm Capital, David and Marty, were the eventual winners of the deal with you. I got the impression though that you were kind of picking and choosing from multiple buyers. You had options. There were multiple suitors. Can you explain your decision making process there? And was it just about who had the highest offer?
No, there was a couple different factors that went into the decision. The first decision point we had was, do we want to sign a broker or not? To have somebody package us up and take us to the market and get even more suitors. But of course, you're giving up 10%-ish usually with most brokerages. And we had found one that we really liked and we were planning on doing that. But then right around December, we got 5 or 6 inbound emails from different acquisition groups that kind of specialize in buying SaaS companies like ours.
Why has that suddenly happened, do you think, like that?
I think it's just hard. It's really hard to find,
indie hackers, isn't it? It's all indie hackers' fault, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to find investments these days that have safe yields. And SaaS businesses are great. They're very lean and profitable. And so I think investors are starting to get just more interested in, and now these firms are popping up and, they have LPs basically, and then they go buy these companies and put them together. So it's almost like a new flavor of private equity, but just focus on niche bootstrap SaaS companies. So the timing was good where we had multiple of those groups email us and we decided, well, let's take these 5, 6 and do our own due diligence and start the process and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then we'll sign a broker in February or March. Because in the past, we had known that we knew that people are looking at net profit, trailing 12 months, basically, of EBITDA and with a multiple tied to it. So we could do the math and figure out kind of where we were going to be at what, each quarter we would look and be like, okay, should we do it now or should we wait? But we got to the range that we wanted and we were at the range. And so we started the process with those 5 groups and it was a lot of work. I mean, we basically sourced, negotiated and closed the deal all on our own. We paid $7,000 in legal fees to actually just help us with the contract itself. And now I know why brokers are valuable because that was a ton of work. But basically we just kicked off, we had 5 different conversations going where we would do, introductions, due diligence. We put together just a big data room where, with all of our revenue metrics, our analytics, product metrics, all those things. And basically we knew we wanted a SaaS portfolio company and Calm Capital. There were a lot of great ones. It was a hard choice, but Calm had the best deal financially. And they also had a little different approach where they were going to work with us. We were still going to be getting incentivized over 3 years. So we got most of the deal up front, but there is incentive. There's an incentive for us to be involved as advisors and help them grow over the next 3 years.
Is that like an earnout or just like
pretty much. Yeah, just an earnout.
Yeah, and for those listening, if you want to hear David and Marty's side from Calm Capital, the co-founders there, we didn't actually talk a lot about your Wave acquisition specifically. They did talk about some of their previous acquisitions, but you can certainly hear their philosophy about being calm and peaceful and
Hmm.
controlling the experience for you as a founder and your
Yeah.
co-founders as well in episode 2 of Vested Capital. So you can go have a listen to that one. I just recorded and published. I had a question that surfaced when you were talking about the valuation. So you said
Hmm.
net profit after tax. One of the things, though, with a company like yours, you could choose to plow all the profit or cash into growth, like buying more ads, creating more content, or you could pull back on that at the point you're ready to sell to make that number bigger so you can get a bigger buyout. Like, how do you factor that in with your sale?
We got to a point, I think it was just the stage of the company where we were starting to get diminishing returns on a lot of the functions that we were doing. Like we kind of tapped out paid advertising. The more money we put in there, we weren't necessarily getting the same return back. I think we had kind of found the sweet spot there. And it really felt like the company needed to move to a next phase of actual product development and offerings in general. So it didn't make sense for us to reinvest in the same things we were doing because we kind of felt like we had started hitting a point where it was time for something new. They had some great ideas on Wave 2.0, basically. Like, what is Wave going to become? How is it going to help podcasters in other ways? And that was part of the evaluation process as well. It was like, oh, these guys have, not only do they want to buy it and take care of it, but they actually want to grow it significantly. And that's what ultimately we want to happen. We want Wave to, become something bigger. And they were thinking about growth in the same way that we would have if we felt like we were the right people to do it.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So, but just to clarify the money side, if you're doing, let's say, 2 million a year at the time you
Hmm.
just finally made this deal, your profit margin net could be 25%, 500,000 in a year, or could be 1 million or even more, depending. I don't know how big your salary costs
Hmm.
are for the company and so on, but it definitely fluctuates. I know for myself running a company, it's like, how many team members do we have this month? How
Yeah.
much do we decide to spend on anything from advertising to development and so on? And it feels like it's hard to just come and say, okay, well, this year we did 100,000, last year we did 600,000. It could be very different, is I guess what I'm saying. So when you have a buyer and multiple buyers in this case,
Hmm.
are they, I'm asking the wrong person, I should be asking the buyers, but in their minds, are they thinking, if we just keep it running as it is, we know the founders were taking this much capital as
Hmm.
dividends or salary, whatever it is, so there'll be that money. It'll be roughly this amount of net profit. Obviously, we can decide how to play with it, but
Yeah.
that's how we're doing the value for what we're going to pay.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I don't know the exact numbers that they have in mind, but I think the general approach and the way they explained it well was that we were always running at 65 to 70% profit margins, which was really, we really optimized for that.
That's
Maybe at
huge.
the
Yeah.
yeah, maybe at the expense of growth. We could have been doing, trying other things. But they want to bring it down to about 50. And then so they're basically looking at it and saying, okay, we're going to buy this and there's this 20% difference in margin that we're going to turn that into growth and start putting that into, hire people and kind of start getting systems in place to get to that next level.
So do they use the 50% number when making an offer to you?
That was more just like their plan,
Okay.
as far
So
as
that's not the number.
as far as their plan going forward.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're still looking at it with your number, 65,
Yeah.
70% when they're
Yeah,
making an
definitely.
acquisition, as opposed to what they're mentioning. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a crazy how common it sort of is to take net profit, multiply it by 3 to 5, and that's what we're going to make
Yep.
to you.
And that's pretty
And
much that's what everybody did. It was either trailing 12 months EBITDA or SDE, seller discretionary earning, which means you could, say some things weren't specifically used for running or growing the business, and those could be cut. And then the market really seemed to be somewhere between 2, 3 to 6 times multiples. It's kind of what we were seeing. It was really interesting to learn and, listen to how these different groups come to that specific valuation, and what they try to do is really interesting. We learned a lot.
it must be fun to see the term sheet come in with the offer, right? Just to see what the different offers were from the different
Yeah,
buyers.
yeah, it was always this big anticipation, like, oh man, what are we gonna see? Everybody was fairly close, so a lot of it came down to culture fit too. It's like, who we're going to be working with these people for a long time. David and Marty from Calmer, they're in North Carolina. That was also a big component for us, as they're local. We felt like we liked the idea of our business staying in the Carolinas, and They hired Jeff, the new CEO of Wave, is in North Carolina as well. So we're all kind of close, and we've gotten together and just really like each other. It's just a lot of good, it was a good culture fit.
Nice. Okay, yeah, I can see that. All right, well, might start heading towards the end of the show here, Baird.
Yeah.
It's been a great journey. I appreciate all the detail of all these steps. Like, very clear in my mind now what you've created over the years.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm most impressed that you could create a subtitle while you're building a wave. To me, that is really impressive. That it's kind of like breaking the rules, but you made it happen, and it's exciting to have two projects that are both growing. Turnkey obviously is your current focus. It does sound like it's early days. You're talking about getting your first 50 customers earlier in the show, so you're out there doing that. Is there anything you want to share about Turnkey and maybe even like what's different with this new SaaS compared to all the other ones because you've got all this experience?
Well, that's the thing. Everything's different. This is our first B2B SaaS. The first company, all the other companies, I don't know who coined this term, but we say prosumers. They're not. It's not B2C. These podcasters are prosumers. A lot of them are trying to make this their full time. They're in the process of moving towards more B2B, but it's totally different. Everything's different. We have to think about implementation timelines. How do we actually take somebody through the sales process and get them implemented? There's multiple people involved. There's usually a founder we're in contact with, and then they have engineers that are actually implementing it. Whereas before, we're just trying to drive people to a landing page and convert a small percentage. Now it's very hands-on. It's something that businesses need to think about. How do they want to implement it? What offers do they want to deliver? So there's this consultative component as well. So I'd say it's been a bit of a challenge for us to transition to the B2B mindset and all these different things. We're trying to kind of the same thing with Subtitle. We're trying to use a lot of the same playbooks from the other companies and realizing that they're not working. Like content marketing is not really driving much of a difference for us with Turnkey. But we're moving into much more of a sales-driven model, which is fun for me to dust off my old sales experience. So it's been different. Yeah, B2B is very different. I think a lot of times, I was thinking about this the other day, I think there was a common suggestion to SaaS founders that they should start B2B. They're like, you need to do B2B. There's less churn. It's higher prices, which is true. And I think a lot of people almost default to that. But it's such a different business. Like it takes a different skill set. Like you need to be able to, navigate organizations to do B2B. With B2C prosumers, you're more in the, creative process of actually building the product. So they're very different. I think, again, it's just important to think about your personality, what you're good at, what are your strengths, and try to, build businesses that leverages those as opposed to just, doing what people tell you to do.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how you guys go. Let's talk in 5 years and see where Turnkey is. And you're right. You've got a different, somewhat different, somewhat similar. I think about what you personally have been doing. You've been creating content. You've been doing direct approach, and that might get the initial interest possibly. But like you said, there's going to be like a more of a discovery, learning how does this tool work kind of process. But you're definitely hitting on a major issue that is ripe for building some kind of software solution around. So that's fun.
It's also interesting that timing has become such an important thing with their customers' timing of when they want to implement Turnkey, because most people, the first couple of years of their company, they're all focused on growth because you have to do that. Right. You have to get the business up and going. And it's hard for them to focus on churn in the early days. But then there's this moment when growth starts plateauing a little bit. It's like all of a sudden churn becomes a problem. So we have to build relationships with these companies so that when that time happens, we're ready to, we're there and top of mind for them. So that's kind of a different problem too, where before a lot of things that we were doing was direct response, where people find us because they need us, as opposed to now people are finding out about us maybe before they need us or at the bad time. So that's been an interesting problem to solve as well, is how do you start relationships and stay top of mind for when that moment happens.
Right. It's funny. I was thinking this could be a company where your own churn will not be nearly as high.
It's funny that, Turnkey, we're really starting to figure out who our ideal customers are, like the personas of the businesses that really need Turnkey. And Turnkey would not be a good customer for us because the churn we haven't had anybody churn yet.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's going to be so low because you're targeting a customer base that's, like you said, they're big, they're succeeding. Yep. It's about killing off the part that it's not working as well. Yep. So they're going to keep paying for it. Once they see it working, they're big enough, they're not going to turn it off over summer, like you said. So it's kind of an irony of the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it just goes back to it's so important when you're starting a company to not have too many assumptions, like have some big assumptions that you go try to validate and let the market tell you what it needs. That was kind of the big thing that we've had to retell ourselves. Like, yes, we built this for ourselves, but we need to figure out who our ideal customers are. They might be different than us and they're going to want different things than we've had. So we've kind of had this 2 to 4 month transition period of going from, ourselves as customers to who is our customer? How do we find those people and get them activated? And it's been much more involved. All of our costs are in customer acquisition, where with the other businesses is the opposite. It was like easy to acquire customers with freemium tools, but all of our costs were into trying to, hold those customers over long periods of time. So it's been a big mental shift for us, and having to relearn some old skills and learn new ones. So, but that's why we love doing this.
Well, that's your favorite part of the startup, right? It's the creative
yeah,
side.
if there was a playbook, we wouldn't want to do it. It'd be boring. It'd be like, well, we're excited about it.
Yeah, I've got pretty much, I think, it'll be the last question, maybe second last really for you, and more of a vested capital type question here, Baird. Okay, so I know from the story you shared, clearly your greatest source of capital, making money over the last 5-6 years, has been from startups, these tech startups. And I say the exit of Wave is very likely the biggest source of income you've had. Is there any other, have you been investing, but other types of ways of making money that we haven't really talked about, like outside of startups?
Yeah, I do a lot of investing in stocks and crypto. Is generally where I'm doing most of my investing. All of that is very long term. It's what I do to try to offset my very risky day job, is to invest in things that I have a rule where if I don't have enough conviction to hold something for 5 years without touching it, I don't buy it. So I do a lot of like long term investing in stocks and crypto. I haven't done anything. I'm definitely interested in like property management, real estate, things like that. I'd love to have a physical business one day. I think it'd be fun to just have something I can go to or put my, actually touch and hold.
Like a tall horses business, maybe? Go back to
Yeah,
your
maybe I
roots?
can get back into I got a sister in the horse industry, so maybe I can find something there. But no, it's been mostly tech startups and then long view investments.
Okay, it's funny you say those are not risky. Those are pretty wild lately. So
yeah, it's been tough. It's really interesting. I'm really interested in the technology too, and it's really hard to look at that space with a 5-year plus time horizon. So I'm trying to follow that same rule, and it turns into it's hard to see through the noise of what's trading, what's just done by traders, and what's actually value investing, which is kind of hard to apply there, but it's fun to think about.
Are you going for like just the mainstream ones, the Bitcoins and the Ethereums and the Apples and the Amazon, or are you a little bit more obscure and more niche?
Both. I'm trying to come up with kind of a portfolio allocation of a certain percentage, kind of the mainstays, and then I do like to throw a little bit. I found that investing in the new like altcoins that are new is kind of a fun way to start learning about them, just to put a little bit here and there. And the other thing I've been trying to follow also is don't invest in things that you don't understand. It's really easy to see some blog post and something that sounds cool and want to invest in it, but try to force myself like, no, you need to go do research and learn about this before investing. But
can you give us an example? What's one of your altcoins you've become a knowledgeable person about?
I'm really interested in like distributed computing, like this concept of like, instead of having to use AWS and a centralized like CDN, for example, like this idea of distributing the resources. And one of them, Anchor, is a really interesting one. It's kind of the most impressive one that I found. So things like that has been really interesting. Just trying to learn more about how it works, how it's going to work, and then how is it going to actually start getting large adoption is kind of the tough part about it.
Okay, cool. Now I'd like to hear just that little behind the scenes of what you do with the money once you start making it, because people often they hear about the fun stuff, the Lamborghinis, the property they might buy, but at the end of the day, it's really just about putting it into some other asset, right? That's what most people do with the capital they make. So
that was kind of an interesting learning of the acquisition. Was like, once your company's acquired and you have you're trading all that risk for capital, you have to do something with it. You can't just let it sit there. I guess you could, but that's risky as well. Just have it all sitting in one place. So that's definitely something I wasn't prepared for, and something I'm still learning more about.
Did you do any kind of big splurges though when that money hit the bank account? Was there a toy or anything you bought for fun?
Nope, not really. I'm still just kind of nothing's really changed all that much. Still in the works. I'm shopping.
Okay, awesome. Well, Baird, I appreciate the time and the story. I don't know where you want to send people to more about what you do. We mentioned Wave, which is two V's, Subtitle, Duplicate, and the current one, churnkey.com. Anywhere else you want to send people?
You go to my Twitter. It's at Baird Hall on Twitter, and trying to get more active there. And I need to get a personal website up. That's one of my projects coming up soon. If anybody hears this and wants to help me with that project, I'd love for you to reach out. But follow me on Twitter. That's where I kind of share updates and news and different things I'm interested in. So it's at Baird Hall on Twitter.
At Baird Hall. Awesome. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, keep up the good work, man. I really like the journey and the creativity and the jumping from one idea to the next, even if it's not always what you think is the traditional play, but you made it work. So that's awesome. And yeah, I love following the journey. So thanks for joining me and sharing it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Baird Hall. I really thought that was one of the most in-depth stories I've been able to share in a while. So I hope you got a lot from it as well. If you think this interview would help a friend or a colleague, maybe someone you know who's entrepreneurial or is already running their own startup and could benefit from hearing what Baird talked about, share this episode with them. Send them a link directly to the download, or send them the name of the show, Vested Capital, or my name, Yarrow, and tell them to go download episode 3. And if you're not already subscribed to Vested Capital in your podcast app of choice, open it up now if you're not already using it and click the subscribe button, or you can look for the show under the name Vested Capital or Yarrow, Y-A-R-O. That's my name, and you should find my show there. Hit the subscribe button and you'll get all the episodes as I release them, plus access to the entire back catalog of Vested Capital episodes. Okay, my name is Yarrow. I look forward to talking to you on the very next episode. Bye-bye.